you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's top stories. The ambassadors of the UK, Germany, and Norway and Lebanon say ahead of the UN General Assembly that Lebanon faces social, economic, and security challenges. 4 airstrikes hit rebel-held parts of Syria's Aleppo in the first raids on the battered city since the truce took effect. And authorities have identified the suspect in the Manhattan explosion case as the 28-year-old New Jersey resident of Afghan descent, Ahmad Khan Rahami. The ambassadors of the UK, Germany, and Norway and Lebanon are saying ahead of the UN General Assembly's annual session that Lebanon is facing social, economic, as well as security challenges, and that the international community is recognizing those challenges and values the efforts made by the country to cope with the influx of the refugees. The British Embassy in Lebanon released a statement asking many readers what's in it for Lebanon. The international community's message is that Lebanon is not alone. At the London conference in February, the international community pledged more than has ever been pledged before at a single event, $12 billion to support Syria and the region over 5 years. And already $1.22 billion has been committed in Lebanon for 2016 to support Lebanon as well as its temporary Syrian guests. And so ahead of the UN's Migration Summit in New York, activists in London laid out thousands of life jackets on Parliament Square to mark Europe's refugee crisis. The graveyard of 2,500 life jackets were laid out at dawn in neat rows in front of Big Ben in the House of Parliament. They were worn by migrants who have made the dangerous sea crossing from Turkey to Greece. The refugee crisis unleashed by the Syrian conflict has pushed the number of asylum seekers globally to a post-war record high, lifting overall migration flows. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's 35 member states saw the number of asylum seekers double in 2015 to 1.65 million. In its annual International Migration Outlook, it said nearly 1 in every 4 asylum seekers comes from Syria, followed by Afghanistan. 3/4 of the total sought asylum in the European Union, with Germany getting the lion's share, citing figures from the United Nations Refugee Agency. In Lebanon, Labor Minister Sajan Azzi is presenting the first detailed project and mechanism for the return of displaced Syrians back to their homeland, as he warns of changes to the Lebanese entity shall the refugees remain in Lebanon. The national identity, he said, is subject to change, and Lebanese entity is in danger, and the return of the Syrians to Syria is necessary. He stressed this in a televised appearance, pointing to the UN General Assembly meeting in New York, saying that it will address the issue of refugee and migrants. He added that the Labor Ministry is not interested in any decision taken in New York on the subject of refugees outside the framework of the return to their country. He stressed the need to secure financial budget from the Arab and donor countries to cover the expenses. And Speaker Nabih Berri is criticizing a campaign that held him accountable for the failure to elect founder of the Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun as president, and says that the purpose of the campaign is to manipulate the facts and distort the truth. This is according to As-Safir Daily. However, the Daily said that Berri does not hide his initial choice, saying that shall he be made to choose between Aoun and Marada chief Sulaiman Frangieh, he would unhesitatingly elect Frangieh. Furthermore, Berri criticized the FPM's decision to boycott the cabinet meetings under the slogan of commitment to the National Pact, and how the movement considered the government illegitimate even after the boycott the meetings. Four airstrikes hit rebel-held parts of Syria's Aleppo, a monitor says, in the first raids on the battered city since the truce took effect. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said several people were wounded but could not immediately give details about casualties or identify who carried out the strikes. A halt to fighting around Aleppo and the delivery of desperately needed humanitarian aid were key components of the fragile truce, which began last week. While the front lines had remained calm, civilians in the besieged eastern quarters had yet to receive promised food assistance. The estimated 250,000 people in the eastern half of the city have been living under government siege since early September. Rebel groups, which have yet to formally sign on to the truce, have regularly pledged to break the encirclement. Coming up next, the Emmys talk about Donald Trump. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The removal of a suspicious package along tracks of the busy Northeast Corridor in New Jersey brought train traffic to a halt. The New Jersey State Police bomb squad and the FBI responded to a report of a suspicious package under an elevated section of the New Jersey Transit and Amtrak lines at the station in Elizabeth, New Jersey. The mayor confirmed that one of the devices did detonate while it was being handled by a bomb squad robot. There were no reports of how large of an explosion occurred. The suspicious package comes a day after an explosion injured 29 people in Manhattan and a pipe bomb exploded at a charity event in New Jersey. Authorities have identified the suspect as the 28-year-old New Jersey resident of Afghan descent named Ahmad Khan Rahami.
This was a very serious incident. It's going to take a lot of careful investigation to get to the facts and get to the truth. And one of the things we're going to say to you today is we're going to be very careful and patient to get to the full truth here. We are not going to jump to conclusions. We're not going to offer you easy answers. We're going to make sure we have all the facts. We know there was a bombing. That much we do know. We know it's a very serious incident. But we have a lot more work to do to be able to say what kind of motivation was behind this. Was it a political motivation, a personal motivation? What was it? We do not know that yet. That work must go on. Now, we know from everything we've seen so far that this was an intentional act. I want to reaffirm what I said last night. But again, we do not know the motivation. We do not know the nature of it. That's what we have to do more work on. The investigatory agencies continue to look to see if there is any specific connection to the incident in New Jersey. At this point, we do not have any specific evidence of a connection, but that will continue to be considered. So we're not taking any options off the table. I want to be very clear about that.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel's CDU party is suffering its second electoral blow in 2 weeks, slumping to its lowest level since 1990 in a Berlin state vote that rejected her open-door refugee policy. Voters turned to the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany, which with 12.9% of the vote will enter its 10th regional assembly among the country's 16 states. A year before a national election, the result is set to raise pressure on Merkel and deepen rifts in her conservative camp. Merkel's Christian Democrats were routed in the eastern state 2 weeks ago, triggering calls from the SCU for her to toughen up her migrant policy. In particular, they want a cap of 200,000 refugees per year, which Merkel is rejecting. A backlash against her migrant policy has raised questions about whether Merkel, Europe's most powerful leader, will stand for a fourth term next year. Given a dearth of options in her party, she is still the most likely candidate. And from Germany to France, where France is taking control of its sovereignty, and National Front Party leader Marine Le Pen is telling supporters as she kicks off her campaign for France's 2017 presidential election with a speech in which she vowed to protect the country's sovereignty if elected. Opinion polls have for months predicted the anti-immigration, anti-EU Le Pen making it to the second round of next year's presidential election, but losing the runoff. Le Pen, who bills herself as the candidate of the people, insists throughout her speech on how France is not in the hand of the French anymore. Getting the crown to boo against orders coming from Berlin, Brussels and Washington, Le Pen braced British voters for voting in June to leave the European Union and said she could not wait for France to do the same, to huge cheers from the crowd. And across the Atlantic, the U.S. presidential election draws near, and television stars didn't hold back on their opinions at Sunday's Emmy Awards, most of them taking jabs at Republican nominee Donald Trump, while others voiced support for Democratic hopeful Hillary Clinton. During his opening monologue, Emmy host Jimmy Kimmel called out producer Mark Burnett, the producer of reality series The Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice, which Donald Trump hosted, saying he is to blame for the Trump phenomenon. Take a look.
Many have asked, who is to blame for Donald Trump, the Donald Trump phenomenon? And I'll tell you who, because he's sitting right there. That's right, that guy. Mark Burnett, the man who brought us Celebrity Apprentice. Thanks to Mark Burnett, we don't have to watch reality shows anymore because we're living in one. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for coming all the way from England to tear us all apart with your intricate plot. It worked. You sneaky little crumpet muncher, you. Who do you have lined up to fill the spot on the Supreme Court? Miley Cyrus or CeeLo? I'm going on the record right now. He's responsible. If Donald Trump gets elected and he builds that wall, the first person we're throwing over it is Mark Burnett.
In this category, second consecutive. Accepting the Emmy on behalf of the team from The Voice is Mark Burnett.
Thank you so much. I want to let you know that Hillary Clinton called me in the last few minutes that I would personally thank Jimmy Kimmel for an extra free 5 minutes of ABC network publicity for Donald Trump. I'm sure Donald was thrilled with Jimmy. I bet he's emailing Jimmy right now, thanks so much for the free publicity of 5 minutes, and he'll be emailing you in about 5 more minutes for the ink.
While I'm apologizing, I'd also like to take this opportunity to personally apologize for the current political climate. I think that Veep has torn down the wall between comedy and politics. Our show started out as a political satire, but it now feels more like a sobering documentary.
I want everyone to know that after careful consideration, I've decided I'm going with Trump, which is why I'm also recommending we get rid of all Muslim and Hispanic nominees from the ceremony immediately. Wow, this would be so much easier if we were at the Oscars. Mom, Dad, I know I just thanked you, but you need to be escorted out right now. I'm so sorry.
He's otherizing people. He calls women pigs if they don't look like beauty pageant contestants. He blames Muslims and Mexicans for our problems. He makes fun of disabled people. This is otherizing with a capital O. It has been used in our history before to start and win wars. And he needs to be called out at every chance he gets for being one of the most dangerous monsters to ever approach our lifetimes. He's a complete dangerous monster, and any moment that I have to call Trump out for being an inheritor to Hitler, I will.
This marks the end of a bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The ambassadors of the UK, Germany, and Norway and Lebanon say ahead of the UN General Assembly's annual session that Lebanon faces social, economic, and security challenges. 4 airstrikes hit rebel-held parts of Syria's Aleppo in the first raids on the battered city since the truce took effect. And authorities have identified the suspect in the Manhattan explosion case as the 28-year-old New Jersey resident of Afghani descent, Ahmad Khan Rahami. Those are your headlines here this Monday on Future Television. Have a great one.